One day, truck driver Will bids farewell to his wife Katie and their children, Grace and Bram, and drives to work through the streets of Los Angeles, patrolled by soldiers in red helmets. Later, from his conversation with a colleague, it becomes clear that Will is planning an illegal trip beyond the wall. He reaches a smuggler who places him in a metal box and covers it with ice. That's when Will discovers he has a fellow passenger, to whom he reveals he's looking for his 12-year-old son left behind the wall. Soon the vehicle enters through the gates. Then an explosion occurs, flipping the truck over. Dazed, Will crawls out only to be captured by the red helmets. That same morning, Katie goes to an underground dealer for forbidden insulin. By restricting medicine, the invaders weed out the weak, making it very hard to obtain. She presents a bottle of alcohol for trade, but finds the insulin spoiled. She has to fight her way out with a pistol, risking drone detection and death for all. But Katie can't afford to be robbed. Meanwhile, Will is imprisoned, unable to call his wife. Katie is indeed worried, as walking the streets at night is prohibited. Then her sister Maddie arrives with her son, who needs the insulin. Katie assures she will find the medication and asks to stay with the children. She goes to her husband's colleague, who lies about not knowing Will's whereabouts. Katie has to return home empty-handed. Suddenly, an alarm blares over the city. Katie hides under a military truck parked at the curb. A drone hovers above just as a prisoner is shoved into the vehicle. Just when Katie seems doomed, the truck starts moving and the drone flies away. The woman makes it home. In the morning, she visits her friend Bruce Sard and reports Will's disappearance. It turns out he, like her husband, was with the FBI before the aliens arrived. He asked her to return home while he checks his remaining contacts, but Katie goes to the hospital, where she learns of the explosion at the city's entrance. Amidst the chaos, she sneaks into a storeroom and steals several vials of insulin. In prison, Will hears his cellmate's confessions, soon to be sent to work at a factory for the aliens. Then soldiers arrive, one shouting Will's real surname. He's recognized and taken to the Green Zone, where the world's leaders now reside. There, he's met by Snyder, a representative of the Los Angeles governor. Snyder knows Will's military and FBI background and his knack for catching dangerous criminals. Since the military and police vanished after the aliens' arrival, Will had to hide, but now Snyder needs his help, offering his family full protection in return. The Masters demand security, so Will lead a special unit, infiltrate the rebels, and capture their leader Geronimo. As the alien spacecraft is about to launch, Snyder takes Will to the balcony, hoping to persuade him to switch sides. If he refuses, his family will be sent to the factory. At night, the red helmets bring Will home, frightening his family, but he reassures them, explaining he was just in an accident. However, Katie realizes her husband is lying. Hearing he went to look for Charlie, she cries, but the news of Snyder's proposal enrages her. She would never become the wife of a traitor. In the morning, the family is woken up by the smell of bacon, and upon entering the kitchen, they find Snyder there. He has prepared breakfast and even brewed coffee, which is now impossible to find. As he eats, he lists all the benefits of their new status: security, a personal tutor for the children, good food and work. Moreover, the aliens allow the couple to reopen their old bar. However, Will is only willing to agree in exchange for the return of his son, who is in another block. Snyder promises to consider this option. The next morning, Katie arrives at an unassuming house where members of the resistance, whom she informs that the occupiers have hired her husband to find them, await her. The following morning, Will goes to work, quickly realizing that Snyder deceived him. Instead of becoming the commander of a special unit, he is subordinated to Phyllis, who assigns him to find the guy who planted an explosive device at the city entrance. He is partnered with Bo, an old policeman. Meanwhile, Katie arrives at her bar and finds her lost son's belongings. Broussard interrupts her cleaning, wanting to know what the police have found out about the explosion at the customs, but Will has just started his job and has no information yet. Meanwhile, Will and Bo approach the house where the girlfriend of the wanted criminal lives, and by deception, they force him to run out the back door. The agent catches up with him when suddenly a drone appears. Will fearlessly looks directly into the lens, and it instantly disappears. The police bring the detainee to the station, where Will's arrested colleague is found. The man begs Phyllis to release him as his informant, but she refuses. Then Will goes to his trailer, but his family is no longer there because the woman and child are entering his house at that moment. After hiding the mother and son upstairs, Katie drives to Broussard as the couple needs new documents, but he refuses to help, as the resistance cannot take risks. Katie leaves. At home, she confronts Will, who, learning that his friend's family is with him, takes them to a man who makes fake documents. On their way, they are stopped by the Red Helmets. However, after checking the pass, they let him go with apologies, leaving Katie in a state of shock. They safely arrive at the Masters, and while he makes the documents, Will tells Katie that he caught the guy who planted the bomb. And once he finds Geronimo, they will be able to bring Charlie back. Later, Will takes the woman and child to a camp where displaced people live. Katie meets with the resistance leader. Alexander calms her down, as the caught boy belongs to another group, but he promises to warn them. At the station, Will discovers that a group of prisoners is being prepared for shipment to the factory. Phyllis asks him to resign himself. During the arrival, the city's entire defense was destroyed in 8 hours. What can a bunch of rebels do? At night, Katie comforts her distraught husband when he is informed that the suspect has divulged the location of his accomplice's hideout. He leaves, and Katie rushes to the phone to warn Broussard. Meanwhile, the prisoners are brought to the location, forced to strip, disinfected, and then redressed. At the same time, the Red Helmets arrive at the location named by the detainee and find only the bodies of rebels. Will realizes that there is a spy among the police. The next morning, a man with a card enters an inconspicuous house on the outskirts of Los Angeles. Immediately, a radio broadcast begins with calls to overthrow the occupation, voiced by Geronimo. The Red Helmets detect the transmission and head to the location. At the same time, Bram duplicates the broadcast recording and hides the cassettes under the bed, but the military, storming into the house, find no one there. That same day, Katie participates in a resistance-armed attack on a food truck for the first time. During the operation, one of their comrades, Kim, is fatally wounded. Katie tries to help him, but Broussard finishes the boy off, shocking Katie. Then, drones arrive and start shooting random passers-by. However, Broussard calculates the authorities' response time to the incident. After the operation, Katie rushes home and barely manages to wash off the blood traces. She is so shaken that she doesn't want to explain anything and locks herself in her room. That day at school, Bram gives a cassette to his teacher, who notices a change in the pattern of the alien ship's takeoffs. He saw a very large object circling Earth in the sky and now intends to make a more powerful telescope. The police arrive at the scene of the incident. Will notices the body of a boy who was clearly finished off. Phyllis orders to take his photo and quickly learns his name. After that, the Red Helmets go to his house and arrest his parents. Will is outraged by this and fails to notice Broussard in the crowd, who heads to the resistance base and reports what happened. But Alexander is confident that Kim left no traces. Will then goes home, where Katie explains her morning behavior with the things found in the bar belonging to their son. Distraught, Will blames himself for being powerless against the Masters, but his wife promises her support. Later, Katie goes to meet Broussard. He justifies his actions as saving Kim from torture. But now she needs to extract everything her husband learned during the investigation from him. At the same time, Bram's friend asks for his help and leads the boy to an underground tunnel beneath the wall, where her brother slipped and injured his leg. It turns out their father worked there before the arrival, and now they use the tunnel to get beyond the wall. Will and Bo go to a cultural center, listed among the places visited by the deceased Kim, and find a rebel weapons cache. At the same time, Bram's friends tell him they've been going to the other side for 6 months to get food, as there's no one beyond the wall. Alexander learns about the lost weapons and asks Broussard to warn Katie about the inadmissibility of her husband's actions. He fulfills this request, but Katie is more concerned about her family's safety. Nevertheless, in the evening, she opens the bar to visitors. Suddenly, in the midst of the festivities, Snyder walks in. The man congratulates everyone on the opening of the establishment and then explains to Will that by revitalizing such places, the Masters allow people to safely release tension. Hearing this, Katie becomes furious, thinking they've sold out to the aliens for the sake of getting their son back. But Will is convinced that by continuing to work for Snyder, he will be able to find Charlie. Later, he speaks with Bo again about the spy. However, the former policeman, who has faced betrayal, doesn't believe in such a possibility. Meanwhile, Katie tells Broussard that the quick finding of the Resistance's premises is explained by a huge database and a woman who knows how to use it. She's ready to reveal her name if Will remains unharmed. Broussard swears to this. The next day, a squad of red helmets burst into the school. The military brutally arrest a teacher and beat a student. Returning to the base, one of them removes his helmet, revealing himself to be Broussard. Later, he explains to Alexander that he learned the duty schedule of the red helmets. Now they have a chance to be in the right place at the right time. That same day, Phyllis shows Will information about the Los Angeles rebels. If they unite and go on the offensive, the entire block will be cleaned out. She hopes Will understands what this means for him and his family and counts on his loyalty. Meanwhile, Katie takes the children for a walk with Lindsay, the governess appointed by the authorities, and turns on the streetlight, sending a prearranged signal. The sound of breaking glass is heard. The woman counts to 10, then pulls out a fire extinguisher. Only after extinguishing the fire does she call emergency services. The red helmets and Will arrive. He is outraged to find that his house is being searched, but such is the protocol. Katie is asked to go to Phyllis for interrogation. She promises the family enhanced security. Moreover, the neighbors are warned that if something happens to them, they will be held responsible. Katie is shocked, as now they will be feared. Phyllis interrogates her about everything, even the personal relationship between husband and wife. Meanwhile, Maddie goes to the Commission for the Preservation of Cultural and Artistic Items in search of work and introduces herself to Charlotte, the director, hoping to become her assistant. After his wife's interrogation, Will confronts Phyllis, but she shows him tapes found under Bram's bed and advises him to keep a closer eye on his son. For now, she'll hold on to these pieces of evidence. Furious, Will drives home, and after a tough conversation, Bram shows his father posters. Their appearance in the city signals the release of a new broadcast by Geronimo. Katie manages to extract a promise from Alexander not to touch her husband, and in return identifies her husband's boss, Phyllis, in a photo. Later, another broadcast by Geronimo begins in the city. This time, the police immediately detect the signal coming from the library and rush there. The man hears their approach but utters his final words, calling for resistance. He is arrested, although Will is sure it's not Geronimo, greatly disappointing Snyder, who had already informed the masters of their victory. That same day, Maddie witnesses Charlotte's anger, who needs a painting by a specific artist. Maddie reports she knows who had collections in the city as she worked as an art historian. Meanwhile, the arrested man confesses during interrogation that he found the text for the broadcast in a pipe. The police go to the site and verify that the indicated pipe leads to the green zone. Charlotte's workers find art items in the house Maddie mentioned. In gratitude, the owner takes her on board and promises to help with insulin. That same day, Phyllis informs Will that as a sign of trust, she destroyed the tapes. The man goes home where Bram admits he listened to Geronimo because he was the only one who instilled hope in people. Katie arrives at the bar earlier than usual and finds Phyllis in the hall, who wants to talk to her alone. Phyllis talks about her husband and draws parallels with Will, who loves his wife so much that he doesn't see who she really is. She shows surveillance photos from the truck attack site and warns Katie that she's gotten involved with the wrong people. If Katie wants to survive, she will now work for her. After the conversation, Phyllis returns home where her paralyzed husband lies. She greets him, but upon entering the living room, she finds Broussard there. Phyllis immediately understands why he came and asked him to kill her husband too. Broussard shoots. The next day, Beau and Will go to the crime scene and find the word Geronimo written on the wall. Snyder is furious because Phyllis was very close to the masters and demands the criminal be found. A message comes in about the capture of one of the Geronimo group. Will interrogates the young man, who gives an address in the green zone. The red helmets burst in there, finding a concealed room and several people who call themselves the Geronimo group. Meanwhile, Bram, accompanied by his girlfriend, passes under the wall and ends up in a deserted city where they find necessary supplies in a huge warehouse. Back in Los Angeles, news is broadcast that the underground has been eliminated, although Will doesn't believe it. Snyder once again becomes enraged because he sees that the captured couple doesn't look like terrorists. He refuses to fulfill the agreement about searching for Charlie and appoints Will as the head of the group. Will immediately begins searching for the mole, and Phyllis's assistant, Jennifer, reminds him of his wife, suggesting he might be the source of the leak. Returning home, Will sees Bram giving his sister markers brought from beyond the wall, but the son lies that he traded them for oranges. Snyder interrogates a man who claimed to be Geronimo, but he confesses that he is just an actor. Snyder convinces him to play out his role in exchange for being sent to another block. At the same time, Bram rushes to his teacher and promises to get him a powerful lens for his telescope. Will, secretly from his wife, searches the bar but finds nothing incriminating except for a book he doesn't recognize. The trial of Geronimo is broadcast on all channels, featuring relatives of the terrorism victims, and a scaffold for execution is erected in the square. The actor plays his role, believing Snyder's promises to eradicate terrorism. He realizes he's been deceived only when he finds himself on the scaffold, but can do nothing about it. Immediately after the execution, Snyder invites Will to join him, promising to show him something unusual. At the same time, Alexander's group prepares for a new attack, with Katie among the rebels. On the way, Will expresses his outrage to Snyder, who achieved nothing by executing the actor. But Snyder reminds him of the need to pacify the population, and that he's bought time to search for the real Geronimo. Snyder's car moves through the city, guarded by a group of red helmets, including Broussard. At one of the turns, a decoy road worker sends them on a detour, and when the convoy slows down, Broussard shoots his colleagues. Snyder tries to run, but Will locks the doors as the car is armored. Rebels, disguised in red helmets uniforms, shoot at the car and manage to pull the door off, but Will shoots from inside and still gets Snyder out of the fire. Drones appear, but the rebels manage to escape. Will leads Snyder into the bar, where Katie arrives at the same time. Snyder is hysterical, but Will cannot guarantee protection by his own means. Katie asks Will in private not to risk himself for such a worthless person, but Will cannot leave a person without help. Realizing that the phone doesn't work, he goes outside to a payphone to call for backup. Meanwhile, Alexander, learning about Will's role in saving Snyder, is furious, but then Katie communicates via radio that the traitor is in the bar. She returns to Snyder and keeps the conversation going to lower his guard. He boasts about being a professor of economics, which earned him a high position. He mentions there are 7 more colonies, but he doesn't know what happens beyond them. Will returns, announcing that he has managed to call for reinforcement and it's on its way. Katie bandages Will's wound, and he confesses that Geronimo is a collective image, not one person. Katie asks not to interfere with Snyder's killing, but Will reminds her that another will take his place. Then, Snyder reveals that his people have found their son, and he is currently negotiating Charlie's return. Suddenly, there's a knock on the door. They hide Snyder in the bathroom. Broussard enters in a red helmet's uniform and searches the place. Katie leads him to the basement, asking to ensure Will's safety, but he can't guarantee anything as her husband is always diving into the fray. Broussard eventually leaves, but Will is sure he is a member of the resistance and will return with backup. They barricade the doors with Snyder, who again mentions Charlie, infuriating Katie as she's tired of his blackmail. Meanwhile, the rebels try to break into the bar, but fail. A frightened Snyder tells Will that the masters have tested virtually every person, thus filtering out those they don't need, but he has never seen the aliens himself. As the rebels continue to press, Will orders Katie to hide, readying himself to defend Snyder. Then a smoke grenade is thrown in, and the militants storm in. Will opens fire. When one of the rebels finds Will, Katie shoots him, but Broussard aims at her, and her husband forces her to drop the weapon. The rebel herds them into the basement and leaves. However, Will finds a machine gun and chases after him, but by the time he gets upstairs, everyone is gone. Then, the real red helmets arrive and pull Snyder from the closet where Will had hidden him. In the evening, Will tries to reassure Katie, explaining that Snyder's tribunal was just a farce. There is no people's hero, and those who attacked them have no relation to Geronimo. Meanwhile, Alexander concludes that Katie is a double agent, simply leading them on. Meanwhile, Maddie starts a relationship with Charlotte's husband, Nolan, who is the leader of the New Age Preacher Church. At the same time, Will identifies Broussard by photo, having seen him among the attackers, and receives an order to find and arrest him. The red helmets head to his address, but when they begin to storm the house, it explodes. Will questions Broussard's squadmates, and one mentions a distinctive feature, a tattoo on the chest, which Will recognizes as a Special Forces sign. Broussard infiltrates a restricted area, where he steals the corpse of a dark-skinned man of similar age and build. Along with Alexander, they place it in a car and burn it. Throughout, the leader convinces Broussard of Katie's betrayal. Later, the police find a burnt car with a charred body inside, matching the description of the bar attacker, but Will once again doubts everything. Katie tries to contact the underground, but can't manage to do so. Finally, she finds an encrypted message with the name of a meeting place, where a car with Broussard at the wheel awaits her. Meanwhile, Will's assistant Jennifer finds in the database 14 people with Broussard's face, and he realizes that Broussard is not just a military man, but a former FBI agent. Broussard takes Kate out of the city and asks her difficult questions, as she shot one of her own. But Katie reminds him that she laid out one main condition from the start: her family must be untouchable. She joined the fight and served the cause faithfully. He doubts her loyalty. She leaves, unwilling to continue the conversation. Broussard goes to one of the resistance members, Rachel, and tells her about Alexander's order to eliminate Katie and how he couldn't go through with it. Will arrives at Snyder's in the Green Zone and reports that Broussard is called something entirely different, and he's very skilled in his field, but he'll definitely find him. In response, Snyder gives him an envelope containing a recent photo of Charlie. Will brings it to Katie, and through tears she asks her husband to rid themselves of Snyder's control. He promises to do so when he is ready. Meanwhile, Charlotte learns about Maddie and Nolan's relationship and threatens to fire her. Nolan decides to remind his wife of her place and offers Maddie to become his assistant. The police receive new information, with which Will goes home. He shows his wife a photo of Broussard and tells her that his fingerprints were found in their bar. This means he was there before. Katie says she doesn't know him, but Will shows her photos of his victims, and she recalls that he indeed visited them and said he lived in his mother's house and was fixing it. Jennifer immediately finds Broussard's mother's house through receipts from construction stores. Rachel comes to Katie, confessing that Broussard indeed killed many, but it's part of the resistance. Katie reminds her that she almost became one of his victims, but Rachel reminds her that Broussard didn't carry out that order. Then Katie calls Broussard and warns him that Will has figured him out. The Red Helmets go to Broussard's mother's house, but it's empty. The abandoned tools make it clear he received a warning. Will calls out to a neighbor who turns out to be Alexander, and he says he hasn't seen his neighbor. Will leaves, but then stops. On Broussard's table lies the same book as in his wife's bar. Will's partner ends up at a factory where people often get sick and die. It turns out the factories are built on the moon. Will shows his children a photo of Charlie and admits he only started working for the government to get him back. That morning, the governor of the Los Angeles block arrives at Snyder's to inform him that the chief minister of the Pacific region is coming for an inspection. He assures everything is going well, but the woman is very doubtful. Katie goes to Rachel and learns that her underage sons are also in the resistance. She is stunned by the woman's courage, but still announces her departure from the group, fearing for her family. Rachel promises her support. Alexander calls Will and declares that his wife is the mole leaking information to the rebels. He sets up a meeting place. Will goes there. He immediately recognizes Broussard's neighbor, who confesses that he is the head of the cell and is willing to betray everyone for the right to leave the block. Meanwhile, Broussard meets with the leader of the youth cell of the rebels, from whom he receives information about the arrival of an important person. Will returns to Beau and tells him everything. Later, he goes to Snyder and conveys Alexander's conditions. Snyder demands a personal meeting. In the evening, Katie returns to the topic of Charlie. If Snyder knows where he is, why can't he bring him back? But the conversation shifts to the meeting with Alexander. He reveals he is ready to betray the entire cell, and Katie immediately leaves for the bar, signaling Broussard along the way. Bram and his teacher observe the moon and notice changes in its surface. It seems that's where the alien mines and warehouses are located. That evening, Broussard comes to the bar, where Katie tells him about the leader's betrayal. He immediately goes to Alexander and starts asking questions, but Alexander demands he stop all communication with Katie and prepares for a new operation. The next day, Will takes Snyder to the meeting place with Alexander, who confesses he just wants to survive. He needs a universal pass to travel between blocks. In exchange, he gives a list of the group led by Broussard and admits they are planning an operation to eliminate the minister. He will set up a meeting for Broussard, where the police will arrest him. Afterward, Will take him beyond the wall and give him the pass. Later, Broussard arrives at the designated place in the market. Rachel and Katie are also there, and upon spotting the Red Helmets, Katie immediately warns Broussard. A rebel throws firecrackers, causing panic, and people scatter as the military opens fire. Rachel dies and Broussard escapes. Will goes to Alexander's house, which is under police guard, and announces the cancellation of the deal with Snyder. He is ready to let him run, but Snyder starts talking about Katie signing his death warrant. Will shoots the traitor and blames it all on Broussard. At night, people see Rachel's hanged family, and Katie promises Broussard her support. Will lets his wife know he's aware of her participation in the resistance. The following night, a spontaneous uprising occurs during which several Red Helmets die. Bo asserts that people's patience has run out. Will informs Snyder that he has information about a new rebel cell located beyond the wall. Apparently, there exists an unknown passage to the authorities. He asks for permission to let them go beyond the wall and check. Snyder agrees but assigns them a guard. Meanwhile, Broussard and Katie go to the leader of the youth cell, who proposed a joint attack on the minister. Everything is to happen in the subway, now used only by the masters. Will and Bo, having gone beyond the wall, climb a skyscraper and survey the entire city. They then simulate an attack on themselves. While their guard tries to figure out what happened, their commander finds a map supposedly lost by the attackers. Later, Will points out to Snyder the marks on the map, indicating the rebels' attack points. Snyder reports the found tunnel under the wall. Members of the youth cell show Katie a micro-drone, shaped like a bee, capable of flying anywhere and gathering any information. The rebels finalize the attack plan. Broussard teaches Katie how to shoot. At that time, Red Helmets led by Snyder come to Nolan's house, accusing Charlotte of hiding valuable paintings from the masters and arresting her. That evening, Katie finds a book about the benefit of the arrival, given to her daughter by Lindsay. She immediately calls Will and tells him about how the new church is indoctrinating children. Will then informs her that they will move to Bo's house, located beyond the wall, accusing her of spying on him, but Katie can no longer bear it. They constantly lie to each other, and it's killing their family, and hiding even beyond the wall is impossible. Will asks Bo to run alone. Katie and Broussard, killing guards, descend into the subway, open a backup entrance, and the group infiltrates inside. The rebels cause an explosion, derailing the train. Searching the wrecked wagons, people find an alien's body. Will learns about this and heads to the station, where the governor soon arrives, announcing the kidnapping of a master. There was already an incident when 2 aliens died, leading to Dallas's destruction, so people must understand what awaits Los Angeles if they don't find the missing master. At the same time, a group of rebels transports the alien to a secret location, blocking signals with metallic foil. Will rushes home and asks Maddie to hide the children. She suggests taking them to the green zone. He tries to find Katie, and Bram gives him a secret number his mother received the day before. While the rebels try to move the alien to another location, a curfew is declared in the middle of the day. Maddie and the children end up in a huge queue, and as they try to break through, Bram runs away. Meanwhile, the rebels hijack a Red Helmet's car and load the alien into it. At the same time, the police receive subway camera footage. Will recognizes Katie but doesn't show it. Bram runs to his teacher and leads him to the tunnel. Meanwhile, the group that kidnapped the alien moves through the city in a police car and witnesses a house being shot to intimidate residents. Snyder is removed from his position, but the governor can do nothing. Meanwhile, the alien is brought to a laboratory, shielded from any observation methods, and they attempt to open his suit. Will gives the rebel codebook to Jennifer. Together, they review the operation footage from Broussard's arrest attempt and identify the youth cell leader, who was also in the database. The rebels figure out how to activate the communicator on the alien's wrist when Will knocks on the door. He asks to hand over the kidnapped and run, or he won't be able to save them, but Katie refuses to open the door, instead breaking the isolation, forcing the rebels to flee through a secret passage. At that moment, drones converge on the house. Katie opens the door, and Will calls the police. The alien is taken away. Snyder thanks him and gives him a universal pass beyond the wall. Simultaneously, Bram and the teacher descend into the tunnel and are caught by the police. Snyder is taken away by the patrol. Will goes beyond the wall to find his son, and Katie returns to an empty house.